This time I'm going to show you how to make this really simple tote bag, which is made from one of the patterns from my Build a Bag tote bags book. This is a brand new paperback edition, so it's just the same book as the hardback that you may have seen before, but we've now re-released it in paperback for you, and you've still got the two unique templates that come with it. These templates means that there's no paper patterns, there's no pinning, you simply place them on your fabric and draw around them. I'll show you those in more detail in just a second. So the bag itself, I've used one of my Robbins & Bobbins fabric panels for the top. I've used a red lightweight canvas for the lining and some faux leather, which I think matches perfectly for the handles and the base. I'll give you lots of hints and tips on sewing with faux leather throughout the video, and it just finishes off the bag with piping just around the edge as well. And I will explain as well, if you wanted to add any pockets or flaps inside, outside, then you can do that, again using the templates and mixing and matching the different ideas. So first up, have a think about the kind of bag that you want to make, have a look through the book and choose your design, go get your fabrics, and then we'll get sewing. The first thing I'm going to do though is to show you around the book and how those templates work. So this is the version of the bag that I'm going to make, and with every one of the bags in the book you'll have an outline of the part of the template that you need to use. So let me talk you around the template first of all. There are two of these in the book. I'll put them against the red fabric so that you can see them. So for this bag I'm going to need the whole of template 1 but twice. So this is on fold. So when I look at template 1 here, it says place on fold for tote. So if I have the fold of my fabric, obviously I'm not going to cut from this one because that's a bit wasteful, that goes on the fold here. You draw, then cut around the edge, or you could use your rotary cutter and ruler. Please don't use your rotary cutter against this template, but if you have your ruler, you can line it up against the edge of the template and then cut down the side that way. Otherwise you can draw around the template and then just cut them out. So I'll need the whole of the outside. And then for the second part, that's still template 1, I'm going to need this section here, and this is going to be for the handles. So this is again place on fold, so that goes against the fold of your fabric. So in other words, you're cutting out 2, and when this opens up you've got the length of the strap that you'd like. If you wanted to make that longer, then you can simply extend this. The wider section here is for a knot or a bow. One of the bags, as you'll see, has a knot across the front of it, so that's that one place on fold. On some of the bags that have a zip in them, this is the end tab that goes on the zip, and there are instructions in the front of the bag as to how to insert, oh there's the bow, look, on how to insert a zip into any one of the tote bags, so you can mix and match the different patterns if you wish. So let me just flick through and find, that's the one. So that's fitting a zipped section to the lining, and the tabs are those little pieces that go on the end of the zip. This hole here is for a zip, so this is made to measure obviously for the size of the tote, and this can either go on the inside or the outside of your bag, wherever you decide you want it to go. And again, there are instructions right at the front of the book as to how to fit that zip. I call it a letterbox zip because it looks like a post box. You post the lining through the outer before you press it. I'm sure it does have a proper name, but that's what I call it. But that gap leaves you exactly the right size of the zip hole for this bag. On the second template, we've got flaps and pockets. So there's a pointed flap, there's a rounded flap, and let me again just see if I can find the bags in here that use those. But again, if you wanted to put one of those flaps onto this bag, I didn't, but you can do if you wanted to. I put a magnetic snap on that one. So for the flaps, let's flick through. There's the round one, or you could alternate that with the one with the point. I can't quite see that one at the moment. But again, you can put that on any bag that you wanted to. Now the little pocket that's on the front of this one is here. So you can see the shape of the pocket and the shape of the pocket flap. That could just be a patch pocket. That could be a flap to fasten the bag with if you prefer. And then just as we go through, that's a small bag, again using that area. You could even make a cosmetic bag by using this size but with the cut out corners here. So you can see how versatile these patterns actually are. But let's go back to the bag that we are making. Now I've lost it. Where have you gone? So we go from very, very simple bags to bags that are fold away and a little bit more complicated. So if you are a brand new sewer, there's something that can grow with you. And again, all of your hints and tips and methods of zip insertion, making piping, adding bias binding are all in the front of the book. So let's get going with this bag. Now I'm using part of my birds and bobbins panel. There's not quite enough fabric to make the front and the back of a whole bag because these are extra large fat quarters, but there is enough to do the top of the bag here in this design with some piping, and then I'm using a faux leather base. So the first thing we're going to do is to actually make sure these cuts are straight. So use your rotary cutter ruler and mat if you have them, and just make sure you have a straight line, and we're going to sew the bottom to the top but with a piece of piping in the centre. I'll just cut that down a little bit, it is rather long. So I've just used shop binding, but if you want to make your own, then you do have the instructions in the front of the book. So first of all, I'm going to sew this facing down to the top of the base. Obviously these will all need cutting down in size before we start constructing the bag. And all I'm doing, you can pin this if you like, is to line up the edge of the piping to the edge of the fabric, and I'm sewing along that existing stitch line. Now you could put your zipper foot on the machine if you like, but this is quite a fine piping and it fits underneath the foot quite nicely without having to put on any special feet. So again, let's just line up the edges together and sew. So it doesn't matter if you're not right up against the actual cord, because we'll do that when the second row goes on, or the second fabric goes on in just a second. So now let's take the top fabric and just make sure that is the right way round if you've got a directional fabric, and then flip this over and we're going to sew right sides together. And I'm going to sew from the side that I've just sewn so that I can see the stitches, and I'm going to take my stitch line just inside here. So now I'm nestling right up against the actual cord. You can feel that, you can feel the bump when you're sewing. And just line this up. And then when we're finished, we're just going to flip this over and make sure we've caught that piping nice and neat and snug against the cord, because at this point you can unpick it if you need to, or re-sew a little bit closer. I'll explain that a little bit better in just a second. Just take away that loose thread. So your piping should be sitting nice and evenly. Again, if there is a little bit of a gap, then you can re-sew a little bit closer to the piping, and if you find that you've caught the piping, you can at this point unpick that. So now let's take my template. Now the fabric's getting quite thick because I'm using a faux leather. I'm not going to put my interfacing or my stabiliser on the wrong side at the moment because I wouldn't be able to fold this in half to cut on fold, but I'll show you how to do that if you wanted to. So let's go from the back. If your fabric's very thick, if you've already got your interfacing on, then what I would do, I'm going to take the seam line here and pop that over the stitch line that I've just made. And then I would draw around this side and make a mark in the centre, and then flip this over and draw around the other side. If your fabric's not too thick, then at this point we can fold this in half and make sure that the seam, the binding's matching here, and then place that over the seam. I'm just making sure that is the right size. Let's line that up And I'm just going to pop a pin in there to stop it moving while we're cutting. Then again, this goes on fold with this part over the seam. And I'm just going to draw around the edge. Now I'm using a ballpoint pen. It doesn't really matter because this is going to be within the seam allowance anyhow. You can, if you have any, use some of those little sticky dots. That can help your to prevent your template from moving. I'm sure Odif do a spray that do that as well. And one of your tips actually for me was to use maybe a few little dots of glue and leave that to dry just to make it adhere a little bit better. I find it doesn't slip too much. Or what you'll also see with these templates is that they're clear. So if I was cutting out a flap, for instance, and I wanted to fussy cut one of the robins in the centre, I can actually see through there, so I can position this right over the area that I want it to be. And they're wipe clean, so when you draw around them, if you get ink onto them, then you can simply wipe them down. And then let's cut out the shape. Oh, sorry, this one's got a cut out corner. Sorry, I missed that one. Let's place that back over. I need to cut out the large box here. So if you have a look on the template that I'm using, I'm just using the area that's shaded, not the cut out bit. So let's place that back where it was and just draw through the section here. Then let's take my fusible fleece. I'm using an H630 for this one. And a bit of a tip for you. You can't put a hot iron over the faux leather, it will melt it. This is the faux leather that's from my Debbie Shaw sewing website. I can't talk about other faux leathers, but certainly with this one, it has a fabric backing. You can iron from the back. So first of all, I'm going to iron that crease away. And I can use a little bit of steam on this one as well. Again, I know I can do this because this is the fabric that we sell, but if you're using a different manufacturer's faux leather, then just do a little test first, just to make sure that it's not going to damage it when you put the iron on it. And then let's place my interfacing over the wrong side. So normally you would iron from the top with fusibles like this, but because I can't iron from the top, I'm ironing from the back. And I'm going to use steam because this is Valiseline and it allows me to. And I'm just going to pad the iron up and down over the faux leather. I'm not going right up to the edge. I can see through this because I don't want to iron the fleece onto my ironing mat. So let's just hold that in place before we cut around the edge. That'll do for now. And then turn this over and we'll cut it out. Then on the fabric side, I can now iron this right up to the edges. So with this one, I'm not sure about other brands again. I know there are other fusibles out there and Valiseline isn't available in every country, but this is a fusible fleece. And do a little test patch first. A lot of the time they don't come with instructions, but this one is quite happy to take lots of steam with a hot iron without the interfacing buckling, which is what I like. On the faux leather side, I'm going to again go right up to the edge and just pad this. So because it's a polyester, it tends to drag a bit if you try to iron, so just pad it up and down. And do be aware that your faux leather is waterproof, so you may get a little bit of steam coming back up again, so just be aware of that, just be careful. Okay, so that's adhered nicely. I can now use this piece to cut out two lining pieces. You can go back to your template if you wish, but this one will fit just over here, or that way, just trying to make the most out of my fabric. So we'll sit this directly over the top and then cut out 2 pieces of lining to the same shape. So there's 2 lining, and I've also made up another one of the outer pieces so that it's exactly the same. If you're going to add any pockets to the inside, a patch pocket, a zip pocket, anything like that, you need to do that at this stage before you start constructing the bag. And if you wanted to add a flap, then of course you can follow one of the instructions from one of the other bags and make the flap up at this point as well. For the straps, I'm making these out of faux leather. Now with the faux leather, a few tips for you. If you're sewing right sides together, no need to use a walking foot. That's going to go under the machine absolutely fine. So as you're putting your piping in there, don't worry about sewing faux leather. You don't need a special needle, don't use a leather needle. A denim needle may work because it's a little bit stronger. When we're making the strap, we're going to fold both sides to the centre, then in half, and then top stitch. So if you're sewing the top of the faux leather like this, you are going to need a non-slip foot, a walking foot or a roller foot to help that go underneath your sewing machine presser foot. That will stick to the underneath of the presser foot, and it's not going to sew very easily without the correct foot. Also, normally when I do a strap like this, I would fold in half and press, fold the long edges to the centre, then fold in half and press. You can't press from the top, as I said previously, so that could be a little bit of an issue. So if you have a glue stick or some spray glue, be careful of spray glue like 505 because it will stain if it goes on the outside. But I would just pop a little bit of glue down each side or spray the back and then fold each side to the centre. Add a little bit more glue on there, I think. I wouldn't put pins inside here, but you can use clips. So let's pop that down there. And just reach over for my clips. And hold that in place. Just while it sticks. And I think we need a little bit more on this side. The glue tends to dry really quickly. And fold that in half and add a few clips. And then we'll fold the whole lot in half again and add a few clips. And at this point you can glue on this side now because this is going to be on the inside and it's not going to notice. If you don't have any glue, don't worry. You can just use lots and lots of clips to hold that in place. If you don't have clips, and it could be quite thick to use pins at this point, and they may leave holes. If they do leave holes, with this faux leather, I found that if I just give it a spray from a distance with steam from the iron, it can close the holes up. But better not to risk it and invest in a few clips, certainly if you're going to be using this kind of fabric a lot. Okay, and then I take this to the sewing machine, use a long stitch as a top stitch and sew down each side. And we'll do that with both of the straps. So just again a loose thread there that needs to come away. And before we put this together, we're going to fit the magnetic snap to the lining. So again, this is all in your instructions. You've got photographic step-by-step instructions. So here's where we fit the clasp. That's step 7, and it's going to be 2.5 centimetres or 1 inch from the top. And that's each side at the centre of the lining. So I've got both pieces of lining here. I'm just folding in half and creasing to find the centre. And just looking for a small ruler. Let's measure. Sorry, I've forgotten what we said. What did we say? 1 inch, sorry, 2.5 centimetres from the top. So let's measure 1 inch here. Using red on red doesn't stand out very much, does it? So 1 inch from the top here and 1 inch from the top on this side. Again, I wouldn't normally use a ballpoint pen, but I need you to see what I'm doing. Then you'll take your magnetic snap, take the back of it, place the centre of the hole of the back of your snap over that mark and make a little line on each side. And let's do the same on the opposite piece. That would be if your lining fabric has a right and wrong side. This would be on the right side of the fabric. And if your fabric is quite fine, I'm actually using a lightweight canvas here, so it's quite a strong fabric. But if you're using cotton or a very lightweight fabric, so I'm just looking for a quick unpick that I know I saw here earlier, but things always disappear when you need them. There we go. If you have a lighter weight of fabric, it's an idea to put another piece of fabric onto the back just to make it that little bit stronger, because obviously there's going to be some pulling between the sides of the snap, so it could pull against lighter weight fabric. So take a quick unpick or a very sharp pair of scissors, and you're just going to make a hole in each side where you made those 2 lines. Keep the hole small, because you can always make a small hole bigger. If you make a big hole, then you've just got a big hole. And then take your snap and push the legs of the snap through the 2 gaps. Pop the back onto the back, and you'll probably find it easier to squish those bars open than it is to press them towards each other. It really doesn't matter which way they go. So let's do the same on this side. 2 little snips. Snap goes in, back goes on, and squish it open. Let's go back to the outer bag and we'll put the straps on now. So it's a very, very simple bag, this one, with no fuss, no pockets, but you can change that if you wish. And we'll need to see how far apart these straps need to be, so that's step 4. And these are going to go 4.5 inches from each side. So again, I'll mark that with a pen, just a little mark here, a little mark here. And clips again, it'll be really difficult to pin this, and place the strap facing downwards over there. Whoops. Turn it around to the opposite side, making sure it's not twisted. And we'll have another clip in there. And I'm just going to sew across the top within the seam allowance, so quite close to the edge, just to hold that in place. And the same on this side. And then I'm going to use this as a template to make sure the strap is in the same position on the opposite side. So again, facing downwards and clip. And clip that one here. And again, we'll sew across the top. And we'll take one of the lining pieces and put this right sides together, so the snap facing downwards over the top, and we're just going to sew across the top. So if you wanted to put a few clips in there or pins, because it's just through fabric now, then you could do that. Just line that up straight, and we'll do that with both sides. So let's open this up, and we've got 2 pieces that look like this. And then we'll take those 2 pieces and pop them right sides together, lining matching lining, outer matching outer, and I'm going to match up the seam at the top because that's quite important that that one meets. So I'll pop a pin in there on each side. And then I also want to make sure that the piping meets at the side as well, because it can be quite noticeable if it doesn't. So I'm lining up the edge of the piping together, and I'm putting a pin in there as well, just on the fabric side to hold that in place. So I'm not making holes in the faux leather. And the same on that side, so line up the piping like so, and pop a pin in there. And then I'm going to sew all the way around the edge, not sewing over the corners, so down each side, across the bottom, and I'm going to leave a turning gap in the bottom edge of around about 5 inches or so. And just make sure when you're sewing that the handle is out of the way so you don't sew into that. Then we're going to make the base of the bag square by pulling the two sides of the cut-out corners away from each other. Line up the two seams in the centre, and we're going to sew straight across and just push the seams in opposite directions as you cross over them. And again, if it helps, you can put a pin in there to hold it in place. And we're going to repeat this with all 4 corners. So again, pull this open, squish together. Now, whichever direction you press the base seam in here, press it in the same direction on this side. So that's going to the right. So my side seam can go to the left. And again, we'll sew straight across, and we'll do the same with the outer bag sides as well. So remove any pins that you have in there, and then put your hand inside, and we're going to pull the whole bag through the turning gap in the lining. Let's push out those bottom corners. Just make sure we've caught all of the fabric. And then pull the edges of the turning gap away from each other, and the edges should just fold inwards, and then we're going to sew straight across to close that over. If I was making this to sell or making it as a gift, I'd certainly use the same colour fabric as the lining. I shan't change it for this one for now. And you could make that completely invisible by using a hand sewn ladder stitch. Let's pop this inside, and we're going to give it another press just around the top. Avoid again pressing over the handles. So let's just pull this away, seam on the top here, and just a quick press. I am going to top stitch this as well. This is just to hold it in place while I'm sewing. Just makes it a little bit easier. Oops, can't see what I'm doing there. So I find it easier to do it this way. Put the iron inside and just press the seam around the top. Again, don't press over the handles. So pull that away and press here. If you do have creases in the faux leather side, by the way, you could, without touching the leather, give it a little bit of steam and then smooth it out by hand, and that can help creases to just melt away. Okay, so we're almost finished. I'm now just going to top stitch all the way around the edge. So if you have a free arm on your sewing machine, this is a good time to use it. So take off the accessory compartment. I'm going to lengthen the stitch to 2.8 on this machine for a top stitch. And then let's slip this over the free arm, and we're just going to sew all the way around the top. And again, just easing this so that the seam sits right on the top of the bag. Careful when you sew over the straps, it can start to get a little bit bulky now. So just take your time, keep it nice and flat, and a nice neat line. Red would have looked nice in this actually as a contrast, wouldn't it? Nice bright red thread. We just sew all the way around. Let's just push this out again. Trim away any of these loose ends to make everything nice and neat. Another one here. There we go. And that is my little bag finished. So you can see it's quite a simple bag to make, just one magnetic snap to fasten it, but this is a template for a bag that you can adjust if you wanted to. So if you wanted to make it bigger, all of the bags in the book are made to this kind of size largest because it uses twice the size of the template. But once you've made one bag and you understand how it's made, then you can extend that and make it bigger. You could make the straps longer. This is quite nice to sit over my shoulder. I do like a shoulder bag, but if you wanted to make those longer, then of course that's up to you. As I said previously, you could add a flap to this. You could add inside pockets, outside pockets, a plique, and really make it unusual. So although there are 15 bags in the book, when you mix and match all of the different elements together, I'm sure you're going to create a lot more. And I hope you enjoy making every single one of them. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.